Let's get ahead of next week's waiver wire next on Fantasy Football Today in 5. Welcome to FFT in 5. I'm Chris Towers here with Dan Schneier on a Saturday, and we're going to try to predict who the big waiver wire targets for week 5 are going to be, or at least some players that you might want to consider stashing for week 4. Obviously, a lot's going to happen between now and when waivers run on Tuesday that's going to change how we view a lot of players, and unforeseen incidents and injuries are going to change things. But Dan and I are going to talk about some targets who could have a breakout game in week 4, or at least are worth stashing moving forward. And I'll start it off with a quarterback, and that's Zach Wilson, who's going to make his season debut in week 4. He's got a somewhat tough matchup against the Steelers. I don't know how tough that matchup is right now, but he is, a number 2 overall pick coming back from an injury. Got really good weapons around him. I mean, Garrett Wilson looks like an absolute star. Elijah Moore looked like a star last season. He's shown flashes already. And Corey Davis is a solid number 3. Tyler Conklin looks like an upgrade at tight end. And both of the running backs, Breece Hall and Michael Carter, are showing chops as pass catchers. So, this could be a situation where Zach Wilson finds himself in one of the better situations in football in terms of the pass catchers that he's throwing to. It's a question of how much he's developed in one offseason. He was, I thought, pretty bad in season 1, but we've seen a lot of rookie quarterbacks take a step forward with, better weapons around them. Look at Trevor Lawrence and the way he's played early on. The Jets probably have better options around Zach Wilson than the Jaguars do with Trevor Lawrence. So, Wilson, he could have a big game. It's possible that he's a breakout candidate, and given how bad QB has been so far this season, you might want to take a chance just to see if he takes a step forward. Dan, let's talk about a running back to stash.
So running back is probably the driest, but one running back that I have my eye on as a potential stash would be Tristan Ebner of the Bears. I'm keeping an eye on this Montgomery injury because if it ends up being worse than expected, or if he comes back early on it and gets injured, Ebner's an interesting candidate because although Khalil Herbert is going to be the lead back there, I still think there's plenty of room for them to run a 2-back system. It's what Luke Getsky comes from, the offensive coordinator there, and their run game has been absolutely excellent. It's a diverse run game. It uses a fullback. It uses 22 personnel, which is a fullback and 2 tight end. They really like to get after it, and they hit the edges too. So I like him as far as the backs go. And I have a few others at other positions if you want me to dive into those, Chris.
Yeah, let's talk about some wide receivers.
Okay, so wide receiver wise, I'm pushing again for Jamison Williams, the rookie first round pick from the Lions, especially now with Amon-Ra St. Brown's injury. If that continues to get worse, who knows? There could be an option for him. I also really like
Shark's not practicing right now.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. as we record this on Thursday.
Exactly. I also really like, if you can, stash Michael Gallup. I know he felt like he wasn't confident, ready to play last week. He might play this week. But who cares? You're waiting for when Dak Prescott comes back. Then you're really getting potential good value there. I also really like the idea of a lower percentage owned rostered KJ Osborne on the Vikings. This is a player both me and Jamie like a lot from a talent standpoint. We liked him as a sleeper in the preseason. And remember, this offense is a lot different than it was last year. There's a lot of 3 receiver sets, and there's a lot of teams that are now going to bracket Justin Jefferson on an every game basis. And every play, every down. So it's like it just leads to opportunities there. So those are 3 of the receivers I like.
I'll also throw out Rondale Moore, who is still recovering from that hamstring injury he suffered in the run-up to week 1. And Treylon Burks is still like 30% available, I think, in CBS Sports leagues. I'm not ready to start him yet, but if he's out there, I absolutely want him on my team because he's a potentially elite talent who has, become I think he led the team in routes run in week 3. He only got 2 targets, but he was doing a good job of garnering targets before that. I think there's a lot of potential there, and this could be a breakout week for him. So Treylon Burks, wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans, stash him. Dan, let's get to a couple more before we go.
Yeah, a couple more. Our producer, Thomas, always says, hit up those defensive special team stashes, and I'm with him. It's fun to look ahead. Jaguars, stash the Jaguars. They have a brand new defensive system in there, a lot of defensive talent, and most importantly, in week 5, obviously it's a stash. You don't want to play them this week, but next week in week 5, they have the Texans. So that's beautiful there. And lastly, a tight end stash, Robert Tonyan of the Packers. We're starting to see what we heard a little bit in the preseason. Aaron Rodgers is going to go to who he trusts. He has a good rapport with Tonyan, and I think we saw last week that those targets are going to start to pile up there. So tight end is a dead position. We all know that. I feel like he has a chance to potentially be a Dallas Goedert type for you, which at least you can throw into your lineup every week. And it's not as bad as it can be with like the Cole Kmets of the world. So Tonyan would be my last call.
I mean, look, the difference between someone like Tunyon and Irv Smith and Albert Okawabenum and all these other tight ends that we were hoping would be good is, well, we've at least seen it from Robert Tunyon. Nobody really bought that he was going to do it again, but we've seen him hit big plays, have Aaron Rodgers trust in the red zone. That could be super valuable. So I think that's an interesting one. Yeah. All right. That's going to do it for FFT and 5. We'll be back on Sunday morning with more start sit calls and updates on the injuries you need to know about. We'll see you later.